This view is fascinating. It gives a sensation of power. It's like when you are getting a project, you manage to get the budget of a project. It's the same sensation. I'm Christian from Vision 6D, and today the topic is how to determine the budget in a project. We are going to look at this based on the PMBOK, the body of knowledge for project management, and there is one process which is part of cost management, which is determine budget. Once the budget is established, we have the baseline. The baseline has several functions. It is how we are going to spend the money during the lifetime of the project. And for this, we are going to measure performances and see if we have variances according to this reference. The other function is to prepare the necessary cash flow for the project, to say at what time we need how much money. Behind me here up, you see the representation of a project which is the renovation of a house. On the upper part, you see the chronology, how it will evolve during time. Concerning the budget, there are two important components. One is the cost, really the money that is involved. And the second component is work, how much labor has to be involved into this project. This is often the case when you have internal resources. In that case, certain companies, they like to have the information of how many work hours my co-workers are involved in this project. For some other organizations, you see that they just want to have an information about cost, and they are going to convert the work into costs and add it to the normal cost of the project. This renovation project, we see its two components. One is the cost. It's about 83,000 euros, and the work involved in the project is about 500 hours. These are the two components of the budget for this project. Behind me now we see a bit more detail about the budget for the renovation of that house. We see the amounts which are the ones that we have to pay the different contractors. And we also see in the lowest part the work component which are represented. This representation is under Microsoft Project, the tool for project management. If you want to have more details on how to create such a budget with MS Project, there is a video dealing with this. I have here the representation of activities and flow of the cost in a project. In a project, you start with an ID, and then you need to define the scope. The scope is the definition of really what you need to deliver into the project, what you really want in this project. So this is really important. Once this is done, we will go one step further, which are the estimations. Once we have those estimations, they are composing what we call the basis of estimation. It's all the documents that were useful to do the estimations, and we have our estimations. Based on that, we will sum up all those estimations, and this will make our budget. Once we have that budget, we will create what is called the baseline. It is that reference that I've already talked about that will be used through all the rest of the project to see whether our spending is according to what we expect it to do. Determine the budget is a process which is part of the group of processes which is called the planning. So when we are doing the planning of a project, it's not just the schedule, but it is also the budget, which is part of the planning. In that group, you also find estimation of the cost and the cost management plan. The output of this, the baseline, is used in another group of processes which are part of the control group, and this will be used all its way through the project. For some simple project, it's difficult to make a difference between the costs and the budget, because those things are done at the same time. When we are at the beginning of a project and that we need to estimate for the budget, there is also an extremely big variance of the quality of the estimations. This can go and fluctuate from minus 25% to plus 75%. Once we are in the planning phase, we maybe have already received some offers from contractors, for example, and the variance on the estimation can be reduced to minus 10 to plus 25%. To have the best precision in our estimations, which will correlate on the budget, we need to do the work breakdown structure. That is to say, for example, in our house renovation, we needed to split this for the kitchen, all the elements that were necessary for the kitchen and the work, and then to have offers for those elements. And we did the same for the bathroom, the facade, and the other parts. This implies a work breakdown structure and to break down the components and to be able to estimate each component. With this, we manage to have variations which are from minus 5 to plus 10%. If you want to dig deeper the estimation processes, I have 3 videos at your disposal. Once the budget is ready, there is an important milestone. It's to get the approval on the budget. That approval, normally you get it from a steering committee or from the management board in your organization. One point that is also really important to understand is that for members of the board or the steering committee, usually this is an investment decision. So they need to know about return on investment. Once they have approved your project and the budget, they need to secure the funding of this project, because all the way through the end of the project, you will need to get some cash flow. So it's their responsibility to make sure that you get the money when you need it. If we refer now to the body of knowledge for project management, the PMBOK, we'll see that we have that process determine budget. It has as input the scope, the definition of what needs to be done into the project schedule itself, the resource calendar to know when we need to use which resource, and the risk register. We haven't talked till now about risks, but we all know that in any project there are constantly risks, things that happen. For this, we will make certain reserves to make sure that we can cover those risks. After that, of course, that with contractors you have agreements, so we'll use this also into the budget, and within your organizations you have certain assets, certain way to handle budget, and we will need to be concerned with this. As an output, we already said there will be the baseline, which will be a reference, and we will update the documents of the project. The techniques we will use, you already saw that we can aggregate the cost, we can use an expert judgment, somebody that has already done a similar project. After that, we have reserves analysis, we'll go back to this later on, and we have historical information if we've already done such a project in the past. We will also have to follow the funding reconciliation and the financing processes. At this point, I would like to emphasize that the most expensive part in a budget are human resources, material and supplies. The budget is the total expected cost of this project. It has to be approved by a sponsor or a group of sponsors. Once we have the budget, we don't get the complete amount at once. It's phased in time and will receive at several moments different amounts. I've taken here the decomposition, like the work breakdown structure into this project. You see that we have different activities, and then above them we have what we call work packages. In my representation, we have the work package 1, which is composed of n activities. And I have the work package n, which is also composed of n activities. I simply represented this by WP work package and A1 to AN for the different activities. We see that for each activity we will do an estimation of the cost. And if we sum up for each group of activity within a work package, then we have the cost of the work package. For each activity there are certain risks. For some there aren't any risks, and for others there are. So for this we will constitute what is called a reserve per activity. Now, if for each work package I sum up all the reserves of all activities from 1 to n, I can have a reserve at the level of a work package. Now, we see that if I sum up all the work packages, I do the sum of the estimations. And then I have to sum up also all the reserves, and that sum of all the reserves is called the contingency reserve. And with that, this is part of the budget. So the budget is composed of the sum of all the estimations plus a contingency reserve for risks, and those risks are known risks. So we have the budget with its reserve, with its contingency reserve, and this is under the control of the project manager. I've seen certain projects where the costs and the budget is not under the control of the project manager, but under the control of a department manager or line manager. In those cases, of course, the project manager cannot be accountable for the cost and the spending of the project. In our case, we'll admit that the project manager is in charge of the budget. On top of that, you see that I have added what is called a management reserve. This is inserted and is not under the control of the project manager by a board or the management board or the board of directors. For them, it's to be there in case of there are, for example, really important changes in the project or really unexpected things that happen. I've taken here another project that is about a budget of 200,000 Swiss francs or 200,000 euros at plus minus 10%. And we see the needs in cash flow. There are several phases, and with the tool MS Project, we are able to show when we need each amount. It's what is represented in the diagram beside me. If now I come back to my house renovation project, we see that we have added some reserves. We have added two types of reserves. One is for work. We've added a certain number of work hours as a reserve. And the second, we have added some reserves in terms of costs. Those reserves are plus or minus 10%. Now, if I look at the globality of the project, I see that the total cost has now come to 91,500 euros and that the work hours are now moving to 550 hours. Organizations, they plan their budget based on fiscal years. For this, it might be that long before that we know the scope and the detailed scope of the project, there is already a budget that is approved. In that case, of course that the project has to adapt to the budget, and the baseline has also to adapt to that budget. There is another situation, it's that maybe the funding of the project cannot be done so fast as we would request it. For example, first quarter we can finance up to 250,000 and the second quarter will be able to finance to 500,000. For those reasons, the baseline has also to adapt to the financing possibility of the organization. In MS Project, we have different reports. One is the report on the budget that shows at what time the different amounts need to be at the disposal of the project manager. We have here the representation of the structure of a budget for building construction. So we see first that there are the land costs, then the construction costs, and there are professional fees, for example, architect or engineering services. And then we have furniture and equipment. And the last one, you see, it's the contingency and it's the reserve. This is another construction project represented under Primavera, and you will see the chronology of spending and costs, how they are planned into this project. The yellow line is the baseline of the cost, the reference. So I presented all those budget aspects with different examples. It was quite long, so if you are still here, you really did it well and you learned a lot of things. It was for me a pleasure to share this with you. I hope that for you too, so thumb up, share it with your friends, comment, ask questions, and I'm really happy, looking forward to see you again. Bye-bye.